April 26, 1986. The time was 1:23 a.m. The people of Pripyat, a city in Ukraine that was then part of the Soviet Union, were fast asleep. No one could have imagined what was about to happen inside reactor number 4 of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Within just a few seconds, a routine test turned into the worst nuclear disaster in human history. Two powerful explosions blew away the 2,000-ton steel and concrete roof of reactor number 4 as if it were a toy. The resulting fire burned continuously for 10 days. The Chernobyl explosion was not a large nuclear detonation like the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. However, the amount of toxic radioactive material it released into the atmosphere was approximately 400 times greater than that released by the Hiroshima atomic bomb. Even on the morning after the explosion, the residents of Pripyat knew nothing about what had happened. Located just 3 kilometers from the Chernobyl plant, Pripyat was one of the Soviet Union's most modern and well-planned cities, built primarily to house the power plant's officials and workers. With a population of around 50,000, the city began that morning just like any other day. Children were going to school, and adults were heading to work. Yet by then, the air around them had already become filled with invisible, deadly radiation. At first, the Soviet government initially tried to cover up the Chernobyl disaster for various reasons, such as to protect its reputation, maintain state secrets, prevent public panic, and avoid domestic and international criticism. However, 2 days later, on April 28, abnormal levels of radiation were detected on the shoes of a worker at a nuclear facility in Sweden. Initially, officials suspected a problem at their own plant. But after analyzing wind patterns, they realized the radioactive cloud was coming from within the Soviet Union. Under growing international pressure, the Soviet government was eventually forced to acknowledge that a nuclear accident had occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So, what exactly happened that night? Let's find out the real cause behind it. Simply put, it was a deadly combination of human error and reactor design flaws. A special safety test was being conducted on reactor number 4. This was not their first test. They had tried to conduct this test 3 times before, but failed every time. The purpose of the test was to determine how long the reactor's turbines could continue powering the backup water pumps through their rotational inertia after the main power supply was cut off. However, due to a series of operator mistakes, violations of safety procedures, and inherent design flaws in the RBMK reactor, the reactor entered an extremely unstable state. The operators pressed the AZ-5 emergency shutdown button to shut down the reactor. However, due to a design flaw, instead of decreasing, the reactor's power suddenly increased. Within a few seconds, intense heat and pressure built up inside the reactor. This resulted in 2 consecutive explosions just seconds apart, which blew off the reactor's upper lid weighing nearly 2,000 tons and caused a massive amount of radioactive material to start releasing into the environment. Immediately after the explosion, a life-or-death battle against the fire began. Firefighters arrived at the scene quickly. Until then, the high-ranking officials and engineers of the power plant did not realize that the reactor core was exposed. Consequently, the firefighters also did not know that they were not fighting an ordinary fire, but were instead standing in front of a deadly nuclear reactor. Their main goal was to prevent the fire from spreading to other units and structures. However, within just a few hours, the horrific effects of radiation began to appear in their bodies. Suffocating from acute radiation sickness, some of these brave firefighters died within a few weeks. To tackle the disaster, the Soviet Union deployed helicopters. Around 600,000 people were employed in the cleanup and recovery operations. They were known as liquidators. Among them were miners, soldiers, engineers, and ordinary citizens. Between 1986 and 1990, they worked in Chernobyl in various groups performing a variety of tasks. Removing the highly radioactive graphite scattered on the roof of the destroyed reactor was one of the most dangerous tasks. Approximately 36 hours after the accident, at 2 p.m. on April 27th, the residents of Pripyat were finally ordered to evacuate. They were told that the evacuation was only temporary and would last for 3 days. They were assured that once conditions returned to normal, they would be allowed to return. Therefore, they were instructed to take only essential belongings. About 1,200 buses were mainly used to evacuate the residents of the city of Pripyat within just a few hours. But those 3 days never ended. The residents never returned to their beloved homes. Today, a 30-kilometer area surrounding Chernobyl has been designated as the exclusion zone. Yet nature did not stop. In the absence of humans, many animal species have established habitats throughout the restricted territory. Although the immediate death toll of the Chernobyl disaster is often reported as 31, Thousands more later died from cancer and radiation-related illnesses. According to official and international estimates, approximately 3.5 to 5 million people were directly or indirectly affected by this devastating disaster in various ways.